You were listening to The Unhappy Hour Sports Radio Show on thenewamericanmedia.com.
All right, welcome back, everybody. In real time, that was only a second, and if there's a split after the fact online, hey, you can find out all the archives. Go to thenewamericanmedia.com. Go to youtube.com/thenewamericanmedia. Go to Twitter, because we post all of our stuff there. Follow us. We're at American_media_, and it's on our Facebook page, The New American Media. Do the search, The New American Media. We're joined once again with Zak Baris, lifelong Cleveland sports fan and NBA scout. And you can follow him on Twitter. He's at Z Baris. That's ZBARIS. Let's do this. Before we get to the Heat and the Pacers, let's just talk about the Spurs dismantling. It took a few overtimes, granted, but they dismantled. They swept the Grizzlies, who a lot of people, probably myself included, I believe you had mentioned as well. We were probably both thinking the Grizzlies were going to come out of that one. Let's talk about the Spurs before we get into the Eastern Conference, shall we?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely thought the Spurs were a very talented team, but the problem was after watching last year, they collapsed. They absolutely collapsed on here. They had that epic collapse last year where they wound up losing to the Thunder, and they couldn't recover after being up 2-0 and then losing 4-2. And I still think the Spurs were the better team, and I think they were the only team last year that could have actually maybe beaten the Heat in the finals. I say that again this year, that I think they have a chance to beat the Heat in the finals, especially if Wade and Bosh are playing like this. It's going to be very tough for Miami to win, although LeBron did take over last night and played incredible down the stretch in the third quarter.
Yep, that he did.
So, but I mean, it's very hard for one guy to win because they're going to have Kawhi Leonard, on LeBron in the NBA Finals. San Antonio still has Tim Duncan, Thiago Splitter. They still have Tony Parker, who is by far probably the most underrated player in the NBA, is having incredible playoffs so far. I mean, he's just been unbelievable. And, I think that San Antonio is vastly underrated this season. I think they can take Miami in the finals. I don't know if they'll win, but it's going to be a great series either way. I mean, like I said, we still can't discount Indiana. They're down 3-2, but it's not going to be easy for them to come back from this now.
Well, I was saying this too. Let's pause on Indiana for just a second. How much of a difference do you think it makes that the Spurs were able to sweep and those old legs? Let's not forget Tim Duncan was scratched for being old on one of the time cards. That was one of the funniest things I've seen in a long time in sports when Popovich did that to him. What's the reason he's not playing? He's old. How much of a difference do a few days of rest make at this point in the season to these guys?
I think it makes a bunch. These guys not only played 82 games during the regular season, but you have a lot of playoff games to play through too, and it's hard. These guys start to wear down, and you want to keep them fresh. I'm sure they're practicing every day, but it's tough to stay fresh all season long.
Absolutely, and so there's the fresh angle, but there's also the coaching angle. Talk about the institution that Greg Popovich and his assistants. Hell, Mike Brown. We're really quick. One question I meant to get to in the last segment. Sorry, I didn't fit it in. But does it make a difference with that Mike Brown is going to be the head coach if they're trying to get LeBron James back? Is that a good thing, a bad thing, or a negative?
I don't think it'll make a difference.
All right. I just keep having that recurring thought, and I know we touched on it last week too, but I don't know. I feel like it might make a difference. I'm just not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing. But
I don't think it's going to be underlining. A lot of people said LeBron wouldn't sign with Miami a couple of years ago because Eric Spoelstra was the coach. That obviously turned out not to be true. So I really don't think it matters. If LeBron goes, if that's going to be the one reason he doesn't come back, I'm sure the Cavs would be willing to can Mike Brown in that case if that were the scenario. But I don't think it's going to be the underlying factor.
Do you think the Cavs will can him after 5 games like the Lakers did?
No.
All right. Well, let's talk about the coaches over at the Spurs and all the assistants, because there's a lot of attention that's finally being paid to just the talent of the coaching staff over there and the systems where everybody really contributes. They're all on the same page. They're very well prepared. How much of a difference does it make as far as preparation time to really dig into the videos? Because they're doing the prep work anyway, but now they have extra time to just focus on the Heat, probably focusing more on the Heat than the Pacers at this point because the Heat are up by 1 game. But talk about the coaching advantage to having extra days to prepare versus the Eastern Conference battling it out so long.
There's disadvantages and there's advantages. The disadvantage is not playing, for 8 days. Look, Miami was rusty in game 1 when they came out, because of not playing for so long. They came out flat against the Bulls in Game 1, and they came out flat against Indiana too. Actually, no, they didn't really have a layoff. They didn't really have a long layoff in the Bulls series, but I think just overall, San Antonio is the coaching advantage in the series, and I don't even think it's close.
Okay.
I think that Greg Popovich is far and beyond right now the best coach in the NBA, and I don't think it's close.
Yeah, I don't. I would agree.
Popovich is the best coach in the NBA. I mean, look what he's been doing for years with the same roster, and just being able to develop talent too. He's able to develop talent at such a great rate. I mean, like Kawhi Leonard is fantastic. They've drafted so well. Just getting Thiago Splitter in the late first round a few years ago. Obviously drafted Leonard in basically what was labeled an untalented draft. They got one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. And just overall defenders. Kawhi Leonard's fantastic. He can guard the 2 and the 3. He's a good interior defender too. He's just all around a great player. They've just drafted, and don't forget Popovich used to be the team. He still has a lot of input in the roster decision. And the Spurs have basically gotten all their talent is homegrown for the most part. Whether it's Duncan, Parker, Ginobili, and that's another thing too. Is San Antonio has a fantastic bench, and they're going to be able to review film on Miami. But and it's cool too because these two teams really didn't play each other during the regular season. The first game is when Popovich got suspended for benching his players against Miami.
Yeah, that's
the
right.
First time. And the second time, Miami had all their players benched, because it was the end of the season. So it's basically, you're looking at these two teams. So it's hard to watch film on these two teams playing each other, but you can get an idea from watching Miami against other teams. Miami doesn't make a lot of adjustments defensively. They play the same style defensively every game, and offensively, they need to run their offense through LeBron James. They failed to do that twice in this series so far. And if San Antonio can force, obviously you're not going to stop LeBron, but you can attempt to contain him, I think would be the right word. And if you can contain LeBron and force Wade to be, to be that strong second option, it's going to be a tough series for Miami. I really do. I really think so.
Okay, well, let's get back to what was going on, because you saw the Heat adapt to the Pacers' big man in the middle, and it really changed the game. That third quarter really swung, and you saw when LeBron started taking over, the Pacers really did not adapt defensively to double him as quickly, and it just allowed him the opportunity to take over. So talk about the adjustments, because we were starting to get into that a little bit as far as coaching and how you adapt to things on the fly. Just what are you seeing in the series? How did it turn so quickly? Because the Pacers seem to have that, maybe not in their back pocket, but they had it. The
problem is the Pacers lack any kind of they lack any kind of offense, where they're not a good offensive team. And when Miami can beat you defensively and they can get in the fast break, cause some turnovers. The problem is last night, the reason Indiana lost that game is because they kept turning the ball over constantly. They couldn't hang on the ball. I mean, Indiana had over 20 turnovers last night. They had over 8 in one quarter. I remember looking at last night. I was like, you got to be kidding me. You're not going to win ball games by turning the ball over like this. It's impossible.
Yeah, it's a death knell for any team. You can't be sloppy with the ball.
It's a death sentence. Whenever you turn the ball over, it doesn't matter how much better you are. But that was the problem last night. Miami forced turnovers, and it essentially cost Indiana the game. That's why they were able to go on such deep runs in the third quarter, and beat them.
Well,
so if Indiana can minimize the turnovers, which San Antonio does, because San Antonio's fantastic point guard play. They have guys like Matt Bonner who can shoot the three, and Ginobili, and Danny Green. Even you have all these guys that are, San Antonio's great perimeter play, and I think it makes a big, big difference. I think San Antonio is a much better team than Indiana.
Okay, so are we saying that this is going to be over in 6, or do we think that it goes back?
I think the Pacers series could go to 7. I tend to think Miami will close it on the road, but if they don't, I'd be pretty surprised if Miami doesn't close it at home in Game 7. I wouldn't put it past Indiana to win this game, though. I think it's a very winnable game for Indiana. As long as they didn't lose everything, as long as they didn't lose their confidence, but they got destroyed in that second half by Miami.
Third quarter was brutal. Just brutal.
Very bad.
So, all right, we're pretty much kind of doing the same thing. We're kind of thinking it's going to be Heat. It'll be LeBron versus the Spurs. kind of reminiscent of the old Cavs versus Spurs, when they got there a little too soon and kind of got dismantled by the wily veterans.
I'm still shocked when you look at that roster. Other than Zdrunas Ilgauskas, they had Drew Gooden, Sasha Pavlovich, and Larry Hughes. That team was awful. Besides LeBron and Z, that team was just terrible. I mean, Booby was fantastic in the playoffs. I take that back. Other than Gibson, though. But that team was really, really bad that season.
Gooden had moments. Larry Hughes was a train wreck, pretty much from the beginning.
Yeah.
It was a few good games, a whole bunch of mediocre, and some lousy. That is definitely not worth what we paid to go out and get him for. But yeah,
no, not at all.
Yeah, I mean, they were showing those replays back in the day when LeBron took over against the Pistons. He scored 25 straight points, and I've never seen a more dominant performance than that. It was just incredible. At the tail end of the Pistons' defensive heyday, they were still a tough team, and he was just shredding them and dunking on them. It was I've never seen stuff like that. And
yeah, and the Pistons were the best. The Pistons were the second best defensive team in the league that year.
Yeah.
Besides the Spurs, they were the best defensive team in the league, and. It's amazing what LeBron was able to do to, Tayshaun Prince, who at the time was one of the best defenders in the league. I assume he could do it to Kawhi Leonard, too. LeBron, like I said, you don't stop LeBron. You can attempt to contain him, but that's it.
But that's that's what the Pacers needed to be doing. They needed to be going after him, double. Fine, kick it out. Let the Birdman take a mid-range shot. Fine, let old creaky Ray Allen hit the shot. Force Bosh to become a difference maker. Force Wade to step up finally because he's been doing a disappearing act. You can't let LeBron and he's still going to shoot over you. He's still going to drive. He's still going to get a few points, but you got to make it more tough. You have to force LeBron to take shots on the perimeter. You can't let him make he's so good in the post now. You have to be able to back him down in the post, and he's become such an incredible post player now. You can't stop him there. He shot over 70-something% in the low post in the series, which has just been spectacular. So you're not going to stop him there, but everywhere else on the floor, he's been ice cold in this series. Well, it's going to be fun to watch. I mean, you know who I'm rooting for. It's just pretty obvious. I like the underdog. Take the LeBron James thing out of it. I do root for the underdog, and the Pacers have been pretty good for a while. I don't know if this is the year. I don't know if they're loaded enough to get it done.
Well, I mean, don't forget they also don't have Danny Granger too. Granger's been out this entire series. He's been out the entire playoffs and most of the season. Danny Granger coming into the year is still one of their 2 or 3 best players. He's still a borderline all-star when he's healthy. Which I don't know if it would make a difference because I don't know how he would play with Paul George. If he would have just come back for the series, it could have been a disaster, kind of like the whole Antoine Jameson and Shaq thing a few years ago.
Well, prior to that injury, the Shaq thing was going pretty solid. Then when they tried to work him back in, it was just a train wreck for the playoffs. That was don't even get me started thinking about that again. But anyhow, all right. Well, that's it, man. I mean, what we talked about. We talked about the draft. We talked about the Cavs. We talked about 2014. We talked about the Spurs. We talked about the Eastern Conference. What else basketball are we leaving out? I mean, you're kind of. You're in Vegas. What is it specifically you're doing in Vegas? Because it's pre-draft.
There's a workout. There's an NBA workout today over at Impact Basketball Academy, and so there's a bunch of players training over here.
So is there anything under the radar to pay attention to? Any players that are starting to rise up? I don't know. Any? There's
a lot of European players that are starting to rise, but I would look at. There's some guys to look at in this draft. I think there's guys that are falling. You have guys like Shabazz Muhammad, who I think is going to have an epic fall on draft day if all goes according to what it is right now, unless one team just steps in there. But he's one of those guys that NBA teams right now, and especially myself included, I'm not a fan of. It basically, he's a selfish player. He's being labeled all these things. They're all true. He's a coach killer. He was not a good team player last year at UCLA. I think they're very glad he's gone.
And it
kind of, he doesn't rebound. He doesn't pass the ball. He's literally only a scorer. If your team desperately needs scoring, I guess he can be an asset. But I don't know. He's one of those guys that's falling in the draft right now. You have guys like Dario Saric who's moving up boards. I think Cody Zeller's moving back up. Cody Zeller's workouts have been phenomenal. Even Kelly Olynyk's a guy, too. I mean, his range has stayed the same from Gonzaga. But I don't know if there's any guys that are epically falling at this point, or unless it's in the middle of the rounds. There's I can't think. I don't know if it's Eric Murphy, the guy from Florida. He's risen up. Tim Hardaway Jr.'s he's been climbing up the boards real fast. So there's been some guys that have been moving up from the second round up into the first. I haven't seen any guys. I think Shabazz Muhammad will have the biggest fall on draft day, considering he was supposed to be going into the season. He was a consensus number 1 pick.
Yeah, top 3 at least.
And
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, at least. Yeah. But he was the consensus number 1. A lot of people viewed him, as the next, great NBA player at the time when he was in high school. And I doubt he'll ever be anywhere close to that.
So you could see him falling down, kind of like the whole Brady Quinn thing, where it just kept waiting and waiting and waiting. Team after team after team after team after team keeps passing you up. How far do you think Shabazz could fall?
Oof, I don't know. I don't see him getting past. I don't see him getting past the low 20s. Some team will take their shot there, especially a playoff team who can put him in a check. But I still think he'll go somewhere in that. I think he'll go as high as 8 to Detroit. I don't see any higher than that. And I think you could see him going as low as, maybe 19 to Cleveland, or even lower than that.
Wow. Okay.
Maybe even to 22 or 23 now. I don't even know, because, all it takes is for one team to jump on him. Maybe it's Oklahoma City and they go, we can put this guy in a check. We're going to take him, rather than going out and taking a big like we need. We're going to take Shabazz. We need scoring off the bench, and maybe, Russell Westbrook, a former UCLA guy, can help him out and help mold him. That's what it takes. It usually will take a good veteran presence and veteran leadership in order to do it.
Right.
So that's what they're looking at right there. And honestly, if they can do that, then, better to them. So it's just a matter of what team is willing to take the risk. It's a high risk, if you're taking him in the lottery, but it could be a very high reward. It's kind of like the Andre Drummond thing from last year. When, basically Andre Drummond went exactly where I would have taken him last year with the Pistons. I believe it was number 9. That's exactly where he should have gone, and it's exactly where he went. It was at the point where, you already have the top guys like Harrison Barnes were off the board. All those guys were off, Waiters, Lillard, all those guys were off, the ones that were guaranteed guys. Well, Waiters wasn't, but all the guaranteed, studs in the draft. And then you started having the guys that were riskier picks, and that's where the Pistons took him, and the Pistons landed a gem in Andre Drummond. I still haven't seen him play a 40-minute night or 36 minutes yet, but, he could be an excellent player in this league, and it was well worth the risk. The Pistons didn't have a lot to lose there because they knew they weren't going to be drafting a stud at 9 last year unless it was Drummond. But it was too big of a risk for a team like the Cavs at 4 to take it, even though the reward was spectacular.
But at number 4 taking Deion Waiters, are we thrilled with how that played out?
If I were the Cavaliers, I'd be happy with Waiters. He had a very good year, especially down the stretch in the second half. He was very good. But, at the same time, looking back on it, they could have had Harrison Barnes. They could have had Damian Lillard, although I don't think Lillard and Irving would have been a fit together. But, they did pass on some talented players. But Deion Waiters has the potential to be a scoring machine in the NBA. He can be a really good offensive threat.
Yeah, and he was a sixth man. He was coming off the bench over at Syracuse. He's getting used to starters' minutes. He's trying. They're working him in. He's got some growing to do. He's still a young kid. LeBron was not an MVP his first season.
Exactly. No one is. No one comes into the league, their first year. Very rarely do they. And they put up such spectacular numbers where they're all-stars. The last guy to do it was Tim Duncan, who had such a phenomenal rookie year.
Right.
Duncan was the last guy to have that amazing of a rookie year.
Well, and Duncan had a great mentor in Tim Robinson, too. You couldn't have asked for a better situation to land in. Great coaches, a great great teacher to learn from on the court as well. It was a great situation across the board. But, yeah, LeBron came in, did a great job. But, you look next year, there's a lot of question marks. You don't know if what we do know is that Nerlens Noel was not going to be healthy to start the season. So, there are question marks, and I know that they're shopping it. We'll see what they do at the pick. I'm not exactly certain how it's going to play out, but that's kind of the fun. That's like catching that card on the river when you're playing some Texas Hold'em. That's part of the fun, is seeing how it all plays out, because you never know. So, all right, Zach, we're just about out of time today. Is there anything we did not put on the table that we needed to? Dwight Howard, Chris Paul? Rumors, Dwight Howard, Chris Paul.
I think Howard right now is at the if we're going over today, I think Dwight Howard would be going to Houston. I just keep feeling that more and more.
Those are the reports today as well. What about Chris Paul? Vinny Del Negro kind of upset with the organization.
I think Vinny Del Negro has the right to be upset with the LA Clippers. But I think Chris Paul has the right to be upset with the LA Clippers.
Yeah, it kind of feels like Donald Sterling threw him under the bus, like with his non-committal comments, kind of like Chris Paul was the reason why the coach was fired. Do you think that'll have an impact? Do you think they could both team up in Atlanta? You're hearing a couple of reports.
I think, like I said, I think it's possible.
Yeah.
But do I think it'll happen? Probably not. I don't see them teaming up in Atlanta. I still see that scenario being very difficult. If anything, right now, if Dwight's going anywhere, I tend to think it will wind up being the Houston Rockets. They're just such a good team on paper, and if you add him to a roster already of Omar Ashik, Chandler Parsons is definitely an intriguing player. This is a guy who was a mid-second round pick a couple of years ago.
Right.
And look what he's become. He's an excellent player, and I seriously think Houston will be the team beating the West if they acquire Dwight Howard.
Wow, with Jeremy Lin, with James Harden, and everybody else on top of it, add Dwight Howard. Yeah, that it'll be interesting. That's why I love watching. You never know. Like I said, I root for laundry at the end of the day. It's always interesting to see who inhabits the laundry. But Zach, we're out of time, so let's see how the Eastern Conference plays out. Maybe we can catch up next week talking some NBA Finals. Sound like a plan?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, everybody, follow Zach on Twitter. He's at Z Baris. And Zach, have a safe flight back. Thanks again for joining us here on the Unhappy Hour. Certainly appreciate every time Zach joins the program. Always good times in NBA time. Make sure you're leaving your comments, by the way. Leave them. You can leave them in a whole bunch of places. YouTube.com/thenewamericanmedia. Do that. Subscribe to us. Leave your comments. Follow us on Twitter at American_media_. Go to our homepage, thenewamericanmedia.com, and search The New American Media on Facebook. My name's Brian Engelman. This has been The Unhappy Hour. Go Pacers. Go Buckeyes. Go Tribe. Man, they're battling for that division lead. Maybe we'll talk some Tribe next week. We'll see. Thanks a lot for joining us, everybody. Take care.